It's the day after James's encounter with Haruto. He heads for class more nervous this time, his enthusiasm gone from the previous day. He agreed not to take any more of Haruto's spotlight, though he never wanted it in the first place. Today, he just wanted to catch up with his studies and stay away from Haruto as much as possible. James walks into the classroom. This time, he keeps his head down, not greeting anyone. He briefly glances at Haruto before looking away. Haruto notices James' subdued demeanor as he enters the classroom, his sharp eyes observing the transfer student from across the room. He watches as James keeps his head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. His gaze lingers on James for a moment longer before he turns his attention back to the front of the classroom, his expression thoughtful. As he waits for class to begin, Haruto finds himself distracted, his mind wandering back to his conversations with James. His thoughts are interrupted by the sound of the classroom door opening. He glances up to see Mrs. Sherry, their homeroom teacher, entering the room with a stack of papers. "Good morning, class," Mrs. Sherry greeted. "Good morning, Mrs. Sherry," the class responds in unison. Mrs. Sherry smiles warmly at the students before handing out the papers. "These are your new seating and group assignments," she explains. Haruto takes the paper from Mrs. Sherry, glancing down at it briefly before his eyes widen slightly. He looks up, his gaze locking with James across the room. "Damn it, I have to sit beside him," James whispered to himself, though his voice was loud enough for Haruto to hear. Haruto raises an eyebrow, a hint of annoyance, but also amusement bickering in his gray eyes. He leans back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest as he waits for James to take his seat beside him. James reluctantly collects his things before moving to the chair beside Haruto. Haruto watches as he moves, James's posture stiff and uncomfortable. A small smirk tugs at the corner of Haruto's lips as he notices James's efforts to ignore him. Mrs. Sherry begins taking attendance, her voice ringing out clearly in the classroom. Haruto listens with half an ear, his attention still focused on James. As Mrs. Sherry finishes attendance and begins the lesson, Haruto leans slightly towards James, his voice low enough that only the transfer student can hear him. "Hey there, neighbor," Haruto speaks, his voice filled with quiet amusement. James doesn't respond. He's focused instead on the lesson at the front of the class. "You know, it's rude to ignore someone," Haruto says in a mocking tone. "I thought you didn't want me in your business," James replies, his voice quiet but sharp. Haruto's smirk widens at James's sharp retort, a hint of admiration in his eyes. He leans back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the front of the classroom. "Touché," he murmurs quietly. "Let's just listen to the lesson," James responds. Haruto nods slowly, his expression turning serious as he focuses his attention on Mrs. Sherry's lesson. However, every so often, he finds his gaze drifting towards James, observing the transfer student's reactions to the material being taught. As the lesson continues, Haruto's curiosity about James grows. He notices the way James takes careful notes, his pen moving steadily across the page. Haruto's gaze lingers on James's notebook, a hint of surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected the transfer student to be so focused and attentive during the lesson. As Mrs. Sherry wraps up the lesson, Haruto's curiosity about James is piqued. He leans in slightly, his voice low as he speaks. "You seem pretty focused on taking notes," he observes quietly. "I'm new here, remember? I need to keep up, otherwise I'll fall behind," James replies, his voice neutral. Haruto nods slowly, a hint of understanding in his eyes. He leans back in his chair, his gaze lingering on James for a moment longer before he speaks again. "That's respectable," he admits grudgingly. Haruto hesitates for a moment, a hint of empathy in his gray eyes. He sighs quietly. He opens his mouth to speak, but James cuts him off. "I thought you didn't like me. Why are you talking to me now?" James speaks, his voice slightly annoyed, though there's no real heat behind it. Haruto's expression hardens slightly at James's words, a hint of defensiveness in his tone.
I never said I didn't like you, he argues quietly. Just didn't trust you at first. James sighs. He's confused as to why Haruto actually wanted to talk to him after yesterday's conversation. I suppose that's fair. Still, after what happened yesterday, I'm not sure I can trust you either. Haruto nods slowly, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Good, he says simply. Then we're both on the same page. So, do you want my help or not? James's eyes widen at Haruto's offer. Help? Help in what exactly? Help with class. You know, since we're technically group mates, Haruto says, pointing to the paper with their names together. Right, James responds, a bit annoyance in his tone. I can manage on my own. As for future projects, we can just each do our own part. Oh, come on. Don't you need to catch up? Who better to help you than your groupmate? And I'm also a straight A student, mind you, Haruto says, his voice filled with quiet confidence, his smirk getting wider. James sighs once again. Is this you making up for yesterday? Haruto's smirk falters slightly, a hint of guilt flashing in his eyes. He looks away for a moment, his jaw clenched tightly before he speaks again. Maybe, he admits quietly.
James looks at Haruto for a while. He tries to see if there's any form of deception in Haruto's demeanor, but instead, curiosity gets the better of him. He wanted to know if this so-called Prince of Indigo High has something more to offer than his looks. Fine, I'll accept your offer, but only because I really need to catch up. Haruto's smirk widens slightly at James's grudging acceptance, a hint of triumph in his gray eyes. He nods once, his expression turning serious as he leans in slightly. Meet me after school by the library entrance. Fine, I'll meet you there, James responds, his tone still annoyed but less intense than before. Haruto nods curtly, his gaze lingering on James for a moment longer before he turns his attention back to the front of the classroom. The rest of the day passes quickly, and before long, the final bell rings. Haruto gathers his belongings and exits the classroom, making his way towards the library entrance. Haruto arrives first. He leans back against the wall as he waits for James. His sharp gray eyes scan the crowded hallways, searching for the transfer student. James makes his way to the library. He's still a bit reluctant given what happened yesterday, but something about Haruto's words kept him going. Soon he found himself near the library entrance where Haruto was waiting for him. Haruto's gaze lands on James as the transfer student approaches, his expression unreadable. He pushes himself off the wall, falling into step beside James as they enter the library. James breaks the silence first. So, tell me, why does the school's prince want to help a nobody like me? Haruto's expression hardens slightly at James's words, a hint of annoyance flashing in his gray eyes. He stops walking, turning to face the transfer student with a stern gaze. I'm not the school's prince, he says, his voice hard and annoyed. Yes, you are. You're literally on posters all over the school. It's literally your title. President Haruto, Prince of Indigo High, James responds, his tone careful but curious. Haruto's jaw clenches tightly, a muscle twitching in his cheek as he listens to James's words. He sighs heavily, running a hand through his hair in frustration. That title? It's just a stupid nickname. Haruto's expression turns bitter, a hint of pain flashing in his eyes. He looks away, his gaze drifting towards the shelves of books lining the library walls. James is surprised by Haruto's reaction. The Prince of Indigo High didn't like his position. James was even more curious now. You don't like your title? But it's the highest honor in this school. The teachers look at you with pride. The other students either support you or envy you. Everyone practically worships you. James speaks, his voice curious. You think it's an honor being the school's glorified mascot? Being the one teachers point to whenever they need a role model? Or having students you barely know pretend like they're your friend just so they can get a taste of popularity? Haruto speaks, his voice filled with annoyance and bitterness. James looks at Haruto. He takes in his anguished look. His mind goes back to their conversation yesterday. "You don't know anything about me." Haruto's words echoed inside James' mind. Perhaps he really was wrong to judge him too quickly. So why put up with it then, if it's not what you want? Haruto hesitates for a moment, his jaw clenched tightly. He sighs heavily, his shoulders slumping slightly as he speaks. "Everyone expects me to be perfect," he admits quietly. "Who does?" James asks. Haruto's gaze snaps back to James, his gray eyes flashing with a mix of anger and frustration. He takes a step closer to the transfer student, his voice low and intense. "Everyone," he growls. "What do you mean?" James responds, his voice softer now. Haruto's expression softens slightly, a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. He looks away, his voice quieter as he continues. "My mother, my brothers, the teachers, the students, everyone has these expectations of me." James' expression softens, his perception of Haruto changing. The prince of Indigo High is nothing more than a scared little boy pressured to be a model student. He takes a deep breath before speaking.
I understand. Don't worry. You don't have to explain yourself to me. And I won't push any further." His tone now gentle and full of understanding. Haruto's gaze lingers on James for a moment longer, a flicker of surprise in his gray eyes. He nods slowly, a hint of appreciation in his expression. "I know what it's like, having expectations put on you. Feeling pressure to be something you're not," James says, his tone more somber now, as if he's trying to remember something he'd rather forget. Haruto's eyebrows raise slightly, a hint of curiosity in his gaze. He tilts his head to the side, studying James carefully. "Really?" he asks quietly. "I do, but that's a story for another time," James responds, his voice a bit lighter. Haruto nods slowly, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He pushes himself off the shelf, straightening up to his full height. "Fair enough, but that tells me there's more to you than meets the eye, new kid," he says quietly. Haruto glances around the library, his gaze landing on a quiet corner filled with comfortable-looking chairs. "Let's sit over there," he suggests, nodding towards the corner. "We can talk more privately." "All right." Haruto leads the way to the corner, his long strides eating up the distance quickly. He sinks into one of the chairs, his posture relaxed and confident. He gestures for James to take a seat in the chair beside him. James takes a seat, his body more relaxed now. "So, what do you want to talk about? Or did you just want to study?" Haruto leans back in his chair, his sharp gray eyes studying James carefully. He hesitates for a moment, as if considering his words carefully before speaking. "I want to know more about you," he admits quietly. "Me? How come? You just met me yesterday." Haruto's gaze lingers on James, a hint of curiosity in his expression. He shrugs.
"You're different," he says simply. "Different how?" Haruto leans forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, as he regards James with a thoughtful expression. He hesitates for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "You don't act like everyone else," he explains quietly. "I told you I'm just being myself. And as for why I don't act like everyone else, maybe it's because I just started going to this school." Haruto nods slowly, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He leans back in his chair, his gaze never leaving James's face. "That's what intrigues me," he admits quietly, his eyes piercing as he studies James intently. "You're not afraid to speak your mind. You don't care about my reputation or status. It's refreshing," he observes. James looks at Haruto, a small smile forming on his face. "It's not that I don't care about your status. I've met other people like you. I've learned that under all that shining armor is just another person," James explains, his voice softer now, with a hint of friendliness. "And it's too tiring to worry about that stuff anyway. When you've transferred as many times as me, you learn it's easier not to worry about what other people think," he continues. Haruto's eyebrows raise slightly,
a hint of surprise in his gaze. He leans forward, his elbows resting on his knees as he listens intently to James's words. "How many times have you transferred again?" he asks. "This is my 8th time now, my 8th time being the transfer student, the new kid," James responds, a hint of sadness in his voice. Haruto's eyes widen slightly, a mix of surprise and admiration in his expression. He leans back in his chair, his gaze never leaving James's face. 8 times, he repeats quietly. "That's impressive."
It's not really. It just means you never form any real connections. The people you meet soon forget you when you leave, and you feel like you don't belong anywhere. James's voice was quieter now, the sadness hard to ignore in his tone. Haruto's expression softens slightly, a hint of empathy in his gray eyes. He nods slowly, his voice quiet as he speaks. I think I understand. You've moved around so much you feel like you have nothing to go back to," he admits. James takes a deep breath before speaking again. "It's fine. My dad said this will be the last time. When I graduate and turn 18, I'll live in my own place, make my own decisions." Haruto's gaze lingers on James, a hint of curiosity in his expression. He tilts his head to the side, studying the transfer student carefully. "Your own place?" he repeats quietly. "That sounds liberating." "Yeah, hopefully, if I work hard enough, get a scholarship and work part-time." James responds, his earliest sadness replaced by determination. Haruto nods slowly, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He leans back in his chair, his arms crossing over his chest as he regards James with a thoughtful expression. "You seem determined," he observes quietly. James smiles a little at Haruto's words, a small form of validation that no one has ever given to him. "Thanks. I just want something permanent, you know? Something I know will stay the same, at least for a while." Haruto's expression turns serious, a hint of empathy in his gray eyes. He nods slowly, his voice quiet as he speaks. "I get that," he admits. "Sometimes it feels like nothing is permanent." James' smile widens at Haruto's understanding. "What about you, Mr. Prince? What's your deal?"
Haruto's jaw clenches slightly at the mention of his nickname, a hint of annoyance flashing in his gray eyes. He sighs heavily, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Well, for starter, I don't want to be the prince," he says, his tone harsh. Sensing his mood shift, James quickly apologized. All right. Geez, I'm sorry." Haruto's expression softens slightly at James's apology, a hint of appreciation in his gray eyes. He nods slowly, his voice quiet as he speaks. "I just want..." He pauses, searching for the right words. "I just want to be left alone," Haruto admits, quietly, his gaze drifting towards the library shelves. "I'm tired of the constant attention, the fake smiles, and the expectations." James looks at Haruto with empathy. "I get that. After my 6th transfer, just before I graduate grade school, I just wanted to be left alone too. It's not worth it, right? The attention, especially when you don't feel like yourself." Haruto's gaze snaps back to James, a flicker of understanding in his gray eyes. He nods slowly, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "It's exhausting, isn't it?" Haruto's expression turns thoughtful, a hint of vulnerability in his gray eyes. He leans forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees as he regards James intently. "You know, you're the first person who's ever understood that." James looks at the table, a small smile forming on his face. His new understanding of Haruto has helped him see the man behind the prince. However, a question still lingered in his mind. "I have a question. If you don't want the attention, why bother with me then? Aren't you worried I'm just using you like the others?" Haruto's eyebrows raise slightly, a hint of surprise in his gray eyes. He leans back in his chair, his arms crossing over his chest as he studies James carefully. "I don't know." Haruto's gaze lingers on James, a mix of curiosity and confusion in his expression. He shrugs nonchalantly, his voice casual as he speaks. "Maybe I'm just tired of being alone," he admits quietly. You don't want the attention, but you also don't want to be alone. Such a complex person, James remarks, a hint of teasing in his voice. Haruto's lips twitch upwards into a small, wry smile at James' words. He nods slowly, a hint of self-deprecation in his expression. "I'm complicated," he admits quietly. "I agree, but complicated isn't too bad. It's better than being one-sided," James responds, his voice more playful now. Haruto's eyebrows raise slightly, a hint of surprise in his gray eyes. He tilts his head to the side, studying James with a thoughtful expression. "You agree?" he repeats quietly, a hint of curiosity in his voice. Haruto's expression turns serious, a hint of vulnerability in his gray eyes. He leans forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees as he regards James intently. "Why don't you seem to care about my reputation? You have the opportunity now to be one of the cool kids just by being near me, and yet I have a feeling it doesn't matter to you." James thinks for a moment before answering. "It's not that I don't care. It's just that I think there's more to you than meets the eye. Something more than the school prince." Haruto's gaze lingers on James, a mix of surprise and admiration in his gray eyes. He nods slowly, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "That's refreshing," he admits quietly. Haruto's expression turns thoughtful, a hint of curiosity in his gray eyes. He leans back in his chair, his arms crossing over his chest as he regards James with a serious gaze. "What made you like that?" he asks quietly, his voice sincere and genuinely curious. "Most people judge others within seconds of meeting them." James' expression turns serious.
I've met lots of people, connected with some of them. All of them different from when I first met them. I learned to keep my guard up, but also not to judge too quickly, James explains. Though I will admit, I did judge you when you first came up to me at the cafeteria table. When you confronted me, I thought you were just another popular bully, James continues, a hint of shame in his voice. But when you followed me to the restroom to apologize, and today, when you offered to help me, I realized you were more than that. You're just another student trying to find his way, just like me. As James finishes, he could feel Haruto's gaze on him as he stares at the table. Haruto's gaze sharpens, a hint of surprise in his gray eyes. He studies James intently, a mix of admiration and wariness in his expression. "You're perceptive." Haruto's voice is low, a hint of caution in his tone. He leans forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees as he regards James. It's not often that someone sees past the surface. We all have some form of layers, I guess. Some layers we don't easily show to others, James responds, his voice gentler now. Haruto's expression softens slightly, a hint of appreciation in his gray eyes. He nods slowly, small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "You're right," he admits quietly. James was relieved that Haruto wasn't upset with his initial judgment. His posture relaxes a bit more as he continues the conversation. "So, you said you were going to help me catch up? Though I guess we spent most of our time talking just now." Haruto's gaze lingers on James for a moment longer, a sudden realization that a lot of time had passed just from their conversation. He nods slowly, small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Haruto leans back in his chair, his arms crossing over his chest as he regards James with a thoughtful expression. He hesitates for a moment, as if considering his words carefully before speaking.
"We can continue tomorrow," he suggests quietly. "It's getting late. We can't push ourselves too much." James smiles at Haruto's response. Suddenly, the prospect of having someone help him with schoolwork didn't bother him so much. "Very well, Mr. Prince," he says with mocking tone. Haruto's jaw clenches slightly at the nickname, a hint of annoyance flashing in his gray eyes. He sighs heavily, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Please, just call me Haruto," he says, annoyed but not upset. James breaks out into a genuine laugh. something he hadn't done in a while. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Haruto's expression softens slightly, a hint of amusement in his gray eyes. He shakes his head, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Listen, Haruto, I know you hate that title, but I hope that one day you can claim it for your own. Make it mean something special to you. After all, a prince is also someone who helps others. James speaks, his voice gentle and kind. Haruto's expression turns serious, a hint of vulnerability in his gray eyes. He studies James intently, a mix of surprise and appreciation in his gaze. That's unexpected, he admits quietly. Haruto's gaze lingers on James, a hint of curiosity and warmth in his gray eyes. He nods slowly, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Then I hope you can reclaim your title as well, transfer student. Haruto speaks with amusement in his voice. You know, you're not like anyone I've ever met, he continues, his voice more gentle now. Better get used to me then. You'll be seeing me until graduation, James replies. Haruto's lips twitch upwards into a small, genuine smile at James' words. He nods slowly, a hint of acceptance and warmth in his gray eyes. I look forward to it, he admits quietly. See you around, Haruto, James says before slowly standing up. Haruto watches as James stands up and prepares to leave, a hint of reluctance in his gray eyes. He nods slowly, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. See you around, he repeats quietly. James picks up his things and begins to head for the exit. As he reaches the door, he turns around to give Haruto one more wave and genuine smile. As James walks away, Haruto's gaze lingers on his retreating form, a thoughtful expression on his face. He stays seated in the library for a while longer, lost in his own thoughts about the intriguing transfer student. As Haruto finally stands up and prepares to leave the library, he can't shake off the feeling that something has changed. His interactions with James have left him feeling different.